The rain in Sector 4 did not wash things clean. It only made the grime slicker, turning the layered soot of the industrial district into a black paste that coated the sidewalks, the walls, and the souls of the people living there. It was a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. The days had started to bleed together for Cale, marked only by the rhythm of rising debts and the falling rain. He stood in the center of his garage, a cavernous, drafty structure that had once been a shipping depot before the coastline receded and the economy collapsed. Now, it was a graveyard for combustion engines and rusted hover coils. The neon sign outside, which was supposed to read Cale's Repairs, had flickered and died on the letters R and P, leaving the grim announcement of Cale's EA as over the wet pavement. Cale wiped his hands on a rag that was more grease than fabric. He was 34 but looked 40, with the kind of eyes that had seen too many invoices go unpaid and too many friends move uptown or underground. He wore a canvas jumpsuit that had been blue once, now stained the color of oil and old coffee. A shadow fell across the open bay door. It was eager, jittery. "Hey, Kyle, look at this. Top shelf, military grade." Cale did not look up from the intake manifold he was scrubbing. He knew the voice. It was Jensen, a scavenger who prowled the reclamation yards looking for copper wire and selling heartbreak. "I am not buying." "Jensen," Cale said, his voice a low rumble that matched the hum of the ventilation fans. "Come on, just look. It is a stabilizer core. From a drone, you could flip this for 500 credits easy." Cale finally looked up. Jensen was holding a rusted cylinder that was leaking a viscous green fluid onto the concrete floor. "That is a coolant pump from a refrigerator unit," Cale said flatly. "And it is leaking Freon. Get it out of my shop before you poison the air scrubbers." Jensen's face fell, the hustle dissolving into the frantic reality of hunger. "I just need 20 credits. Kyle, I haven't eaten since the weekend." Kyle sighed. It was the sound of a structural support giving way. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled bill. It was his lunch money for the next 2 days. He walked over and pressed it into Jensen's free hand. "Take it. Do not come back with trash. If you find real copper, bring it. Now go." Jensen vanished into the rain before Cale could regret the charity. Cale turned back to the shop, the silence returning, heavy and damp. He walked over to the fuse box and tapped the gauge. The power grid was surging again. He had to keep the overhead lights at 50% capacity to save on the utility bill, leaving the corners of the garage in deep, swallowing shadows. A noise at the side door drew his attention. It was a rhythmic squeak, followed by a soft knock. "Mr. Cale?" He softened immediately. It was Mrs. Varga, the widow who lived in the unit above the bakery next door. She was small, shrunken by time and gravity, leaning heavily on a walking assistance frame that had seen better decades. "Mrs. Varga, the weather is too bad for you to be out." "The wheel," she said, pointing to the front left caster of her frame. "It is stuck again. I can't get to the market if it drags." Kyle knelt, ignoring the ache in his knees. He inspected the wheel. A piece of wire had wrapped around the axle, jamming the bearing. It was a simple fix, the kind of thing a service bot would charge 50 credits for just to diagnose. Cale pulled a pair of needle-nose pliers from his belt. "Hold steady," he said gently. With a precise twist, he freed the wire. He then took a small can of lubricant and sprayed the bearing, spinning it with his thumb until it hummed silently. "Good as new." She smiled, her face a map of wrinkles that deepened with gratitude. "I have no credits until the pension drops, Mr. Kyle. But I made stew. I will bring you a bowl. Keep the stew. Mrs. Varga, just be careful on the wet pavement. He watched her shuffle away, the squeak gone. He checked his account balance on the wall monitor. It was flashing red. He had enough to keep the lights on for 3 more days. After that, he would be working in the dark. He was about to close the main shutter, surrendering to the gloom, when he heard it. It was not the roar of a combustion engine, nor the high-pitched whine of the cheap hover scooters that buzzed through the district like angry mosquitoes. It was a hum, low and resonant, like a cello string bowed in a deep cavern. It vibrated in his teeth. A vehicle glided out of the rain and stopped dead at the threshold of his garage. It was shaped like a motorcycle, but that was where the resemblance ended. It was sleek, a singular curve of matte black material that seemed to drink the light from the neon signs. There were no visible wheels, just a faint distortion of the air beneath the chassis. It looked aerodynamic, predatory, and impossibly clean. The mud of the district refused to stick to it. The rider slumped forward, the hum of the machine dying into a descending pitch that sounded like an exhale. Cale took a step forward, a tire iron instinctively gripping his hand. Strangers with expensive tech in this neighborhood usually meant trouble. Gang enforcers or corporate slummers looking for illicit thrills. The rider stepped off. The movement was fluid but heavy, like someone wading through deep water. She removed her helmet. Kyle forgot the tire iron. He forgot the overdue bills. For a second, he might have forgotten to breathe. She was breathtaking, but not in the way the models on the holographic billboards were. Her beauty was sharp, almost architectural, high cheekbones, eyes the color of polished obsidian, and pale skin that seemed to hold a luminescence beneath the surface. She was soaked, her hair plastered to her neck, but she stood with a rigid composition that screamed discipline. She wore a jacket that looked like leather but moved like oil. It shifted texture as she breathed, stiffening at the shoulders and relaxing at the elbows. Smart fabric, expensive, very expensive. She looked at him, and he saw the panic she was trying to strangle behind her gaze. "Hello," she said. Her voice was clear, lacking the rough cadence of the city slang. "My vehicle. It has ceased function." Cale blinked, shaking off the trance. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, realizing how filthy he looked next to her pristine silhouette. "You pushed it here?" "It glided," she corrected, "until it did not." She looked around the garage, her eyes darting to the shadows, the exits, the tools on the walls. She was assessing the threat level. Kyle stayed where he was, keeping his hands visible. "I am a mechanic," he said, "but I do not know if I can touch that." "What make is it?" "I have never seen a chassis like that." She hesitated. "It is a custom build, a prototype." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a handful of currency. It was a mess of credit chips, old paper bills, and a few coins from the neighboring republic. She held it out like she was offering treats to a wild animal. "I can pay. Is this sufficient?" Kyle looked at the handful. There was enough there to buy his shop twice over, mixed with coins that were worthless. She had no concept of value. "Put that away," Kyle said, his voice dropping. "You flash that much cash in this sector, and you will not make it to the corner." She froze, then slowly lowered her hand. "Your planet's vehicles are pleasantly fragile. I assumed the repair economy was robust." "Your planet?" Kyle asked, raising an eyebrow. She blinked, a micro-expression of error crossing her face, a figure of speech. "I am from uptown." She walked the bike further into the shop. The light from the overhead lamps caught her face, and Cale noticed the bruises. They were not purple or blue. They were thin lines of gold light, tracing the veins in her neck and jaw, fading as he watched. It looked like circuitry burning out under skin. She was trembling, a subtle vibration that he could feel in the floorboards. "I need it to move," she said, and the imperious tone cracked, revealing the terrified girl beneath. "Please. I cannot stay here." Kyle walked over to the machine, up close. It was even stranger. He ran a hand along the cowling. It was room temperature, but it felt like touching a static field. There were no seams, no bolts, no rivets. "I need to see the engine," he said. She touched a spot on the side of the tank. The metal peeled back like an eyelid, revealing a complex nest of crystalline structures and dark, pulsing tubes. There was no oil, no grease, just a faint smell of ozone and petrichor. Kale leaned in, shining his penlight into the guts of the machine. "This is not a prototype," he muttered. He saw a component that looked like a battery, but when he reached for it, the air around his hand grew instantly cold. It was not just a heat sink, it was an entropy dampener. He had read about them in theoretical physics journals, the kind of tech they said was 50 years away. He looked at the girl. She was watching the street outside, her body pulled tight as a bowstring. He looked back at the bike. There was a fracture in one of the crystalline conduits, a hairline crack. He stood up, wiping his clean hands on his dirty rag out of habit. He looked at her. Really looked at her. She was terrified. She was exhausted. She was carrying the weight of a world on shoulders that looked too thin to bear it. She saw him watching her and braced herself. She expected him to extort her. She expected him to call the police or a gang or whoever owned the sector. She reached for the money again, her hand shaking. Kale sighed. He took the rag and threw it onto the workbench. "I will fix it, no cost. You look like you need one person to be decent today." She stared at him. Her eyes widened, the dark irises seeming to expand. It was a look of profound confusion, as if he had started speaking a language dead for 1,000 years. Kindness was a foreign variable in her equation. "No cost?" she repeated. "No cost," Kale said. "But you are going to have to hand me tools, because I do not think I have 3 hands and this thing looks like it fights back." She lowered her guard, just an inch. Her gaze drifted to the workbench, where a stack of overdue invoices sat under a heavy wrench. The top one was legible. "Kale," she said softly. He turned. "Yeah, that is me." She said the name like she was testing its weight. She nodded once. "Okay, Kale." She stepped up beside him. She smelled like rain and static electricity. "What do you need?" she asked. Kale pointed to the open panel. "That conduit is cracked. I need to bridge the connection. Hand me the soldering iron." She looked at the array of tools on the wall. She hesitated, her hand hovering over a heavy pipe wrench. "The soldering iron," Kale said gently. "The one with the pointy tip and the cord." She grabbed a pair of wire cutters. "Not that one. To the left?" She grabbed a hammer. "Okay," Kale said, suppressing a smile. "You are terrible at this." She frowned, a sharp, indignant expression. "I am excellent at diagnostics. Manual interface is beneath my pay grade." She finally grabbed the soldering iron and handed it to him. She held it by the hot end. Kyle knocked it out of her hand before she burned herself, catching it by the handle. "Careful. It is hot." "I did not feel it," she said, and she wasn't lying. Her hand was unblemished. Kale didn't press. He leaned into the machine. He had to bypass the crystal. If he used standard solder, it would melt. He needed something conductive and heat-resistant. He looked around. A spool of platinum wire he had salvaged from a medical scanner 3 years ago sat on the top shelf. He had been saving it for a retirement fund that would never come. He pulled it down. "Hold this," he said, handing her the wire. She held it. She watched him work. He moved with a rhythm born of 20 years of fixing things that were broken. Twist, heat, set, twist, heat, set. She began to mimic him. When he leaned left, she leaned left. When he exhaled, she exhaled. It was like she was downloading his cadence, learning how to be a mechanic in real time. "You have good hands," she said. "They are greasy," he answered without looking up. "They are steady," she countered. He finished the bridge. "Try to start it." She placed her palm on the tank. The machine let out a sound that was less of a roar and more of a gasp. The garage lights flickered violently. The neon sign outside buzzed and died completely. For a split second, the floor of the garage disappeared. Cale jumped back. The oil-stained concrete was gone. In its place was a three-dimensional projection of a star field. It was incredibly detailed, swirling with nebulae and orbital paths. He was standing on the edge of a spiral galaxy. He looked up. The girl was staring at the map, her face illuminated by the phantom stars. She looked like a queen surveying a kingdom of light. Then, the bike stabilized. The map vanished. The concrete returned. The lights stopped flickering. Cale leaned against the workbench, his heart hammering against his ribs. "That," he said, pointing a shaking finger at the bike, "is not a prototype." She did not answer. She was looking at the door. Her posture had changed. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, deadly stillness. Kyle followed her gaze. Through the rain-streaked window of the garage door, he saw a vehicle slowing down on the street. It was a black van, unmarked, with tinted windows and armor plating disguised as body panels. It moved with the heavy, predatory grace of government work. It stopped directly in front of the shop. Two men stepped out. They wore dark gray suits that were cut too wide at the chest, hiding body armor. They didn't hunch against the rain. They stood with a posture that was too still, too synchronized. They looked at the garage like they were reading data scrolling across their retinas. "They found me," the girl whispered. The shimmer under her skin flared, turning her neck into a web of gold light. Cale looked at her. He looked at the van. He had a choice. He could walk out, hands up, and tell them a crazy woman had broken in. He could save his shop. He could save his life. He looked at the invoice on the table. Cale. He looked at her hands, which were clenched into fists so tight the knuckles were white. He remembered the feeling of the floor turning into stars. "Get behind the lift," Cale said. "What?" "The hydraulic lift. Move, now." He didn't wait for her to argue. He hit the button for the main shutters. The metal slats began to roll down with a screeching protest. Outside, the men moved. They didn't run, they accelerated. One of them reached inside his jacket. Cale didn't wait to see the weapon. He grabbed the remote for the back door and sprinted toward the girl. The shutters slammed closed, plunging the shop into darkness. Save for the single emergency light and the soft blue glow of the bike. The front door rattled. A heavy metallic thud echoed through the space. They were using a ram. "Is there a rear exit?" she asked. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. "Alleyway," Cale said. He grabbed his tool belt and threw it over his shoulder. He didn't know why. Impulse. He hit the release for the back door. It hissed open, revealing the narrow, trash-cluttered alley behind the shop. "Go," he said. She jumped onto the bike. It hummed to life instantly, hovering 2 feet off the ground. She looked at him. There was no seat for a passenger. "Get on," she said. "There is no room. Make room." The front shutter buckled. A beam of white light sliced through the darkness of the garage. Kyle didn't argue. He swung a leg over the chassis, squeezing in behind her. The bike was sleek, designed for one. He was pressed against her back, his chest against the smart fabric of her jacket. "Hold me," she commanded. He wrapped his arms around her waist. It was small, solid. The front door exploded inward. Debris showered the garage. Silhouette figures poured into the shop, weapons raised. The girl twisted the throttle or whatever controlled the machine. The bike didn't accelerate. It launched. They shot out into the alleyway. The G-force hit Cale like a physical blow, snapping his head back. The wind roared in his ears. They tore down the narrow passage, dodging dumpsters and fire escapes with impossible agility. The bike didn't bank. It vectored, shifting direction instantly without losing momentum. Behind them, the black van smashed through the garage's back wall, tires spinning on the wet pavement. It roared after them, its engine screaming. "Hold tight!" the girl yelled over the wind. The alley ended in a dead end, a brick wall, 20 feet high. Cale tightened his grip. "Stop! We are going to crash." She didn't stop. She pulled up. The bike defied gravity. It didn't drive up the wall. It detached from the concept of down. They surged upward, vertical, the brick flashing past Cale's face in a blur of red and gray. They crested the roof. The city of Sector 4 spread out below them, a grid of misery and neon drowning in the rain. The van was trapped in the alley below. The girl banked the machine hard to the right, leveling out above the rooftops. Cale looked down. His shop was a small, broken box in a sea of broken boxes. He felt the shock of her warmth seeping through his clothes. It was intense, radiating from her core like a furnace. She leaned back slightly, her helmet bumping against his shoulder. "Are you still with me, Kyle?" she asked, her voice carried away by the wind but echoing in his headset, which he wasn't wearing. He realized the sound was coming directly into his skull, vibrating in his jawbone. "I am here," he shouted, though he didn't need to. "Good," she said. The bike surged forward, the engine hum rising to a scream. The rain stung his face, but he didn't close his eyes. The city dropped away as the bike lifted, impossibly, higher and higher, until they were soaring above the smog layer, where the moonlight finally touched the world. The tunnel smelled of stagnant water and the ghostly metallic scent of copper wire that had been stripped from the walls a decade ago. It was one of the subterranean arteries of the old flood control system, abandoned when the seawalls were raised and the city decided that the lower districts were acceptable losses. The bike touched down on the slick concrete walkway with a silence that felt heavy. The only sound was the drip of condensation from the curved ceiling and the ragged tearing of Cale's own breath in his throat. He slid off the back of the machine, his legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The adrenaline that had carried him over the rooftops was draining away, leaving behind a cold, shaking exhaustion. He leaned against the damp wall, staring at the bike. The machine was pulsing. A soft, rhythmic beat of blue light emanated from its core, casting long, breathing shadows against the graffiti-scarred bricks. The girl remained seated for a moment, her posture rigid. She ran a hand over the instrument panel, her fingers moving with a speed that blurred in the low light. Cale found his voice. It sounded scraped raw. "That," he said, pointing a trembling finger at the bike, "did not just fly. It negated gravity." She turned to look at him. In the gloom of the tunnel, the faint luminescence under her skin was more visible. The golden lines on her neck pulsed in sync with the bike. "It utilized a localized mass dampening field," she corrected. "Flight implies aerodynamics. We ignored them." Kyle slid down the wall until he was sitting on the wet concrete. He wiped rain from his eyes. "Who are you?" he asked. "And do not tell me you are from uptown. People from uptown do not have vehicles that ignore physics, and they do not have gold wiring under their skin." She swung her leg over the bike and stood up. Her boots made no sound on the wet stone. She walked toward him, stopping just outside his personal space. She looked down, her expression unreadable, calculating. "I am not from uptown," she admitted. Her voice was quiet, echoing slightly in the tunnel. "I am not from this sector, or this continent." Kyle stared at her. The reality of it was trying to slot into his brain, but the edges were too sharp. "You mean, I am not from this planet, Kyle?" She said it with no fanfare, no dramatic pause. It was a statement of fact, like reading a weather report. Kale laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. "Okay, sure." "Aliens. Why not? My shop is destroyed. I am a fugitive, so why not add aliens to the list?" She crouched down so they were at eye level. Her eyes were dark, devoid of the whites that humans had, but they were filled with an intensity that pinned him to the wall. "You require evidence," she stated. She raised her right hand. She didn't touch him. She simply held her index finger up in the space between them. "Watch." The air around her fingertip began to ripple. It was subtle at first, like heat rising off asphalt. Then, the ambient light in the tunnel, the dim glow from the bike, the faint reflection from the water began to curve. The light bent physically, swirling around her finger like water down a drain, until a tiny, perfect sphere of captured luminescence hovered just above her nail. It was impossible. It was beautiful. She flicked her wrist, and the light dispersed like dust. Kale let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Okay," he whispered, evidence accepted. He looked at her, searching for the fear he should be feeling. It wasn't there. Instead, there was a strange, hollow curiosity. "Are you here to invade?" he asked. A corner of her mouth quirked upward. It was a dry, almost human expression of amusement. "If we invaded," she said, deadpan, "you would not be fixing bicycles. You would be dead, or you would be efficient. You are neither." She stood up and walked back to the bike, checking the hull for damage. "My name is Ilara," she said, her back to him. "I was sent here as a consultant, a sophisticated word for a gesture of goodwill. My people believe in slow integration. We share technology, we share theory, and eventually, we share the stars." She paused, her hand resting on the cool metal of the bike's tank. "But someone on your planet does not want integration. They want dominion." Kale pushed himself up from the ground. His knees cracked. "Who?" Ilara turned. "I do not know their names. I only know their methods. They attacked the convoy. They killed the envoy. They tried to take the core." She tapped the glowing center of the bike. "This is not a vehicle, Kale. It is a drive unit, a piece of a much larger vessel. If they take it, they can reverse engineer 1,000 years of propulsion theory in a decade. They will utilize it to build weapons your species is not mature enough to control." Kyle reached into his pocket and pulled out his datapad. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. He tapped the news icon. The screen flooded with red banners. "Terror incident at Coastal Research Facility. Unknown assailants. Death toll rising. Missing consultant linked to foreign extremists." He scrolled down. There was a grainy image of a figure fleeing the scene. It was blurry, but the silhouette was undeniable. It was her. "They are calling you a terrorist," Kale said. "Of course they are," Ilara replied. "Fear is the fastest way to mobilize a population. If I am a monster, then the people hunting me are heroes." Kale looked at the news feed, then at the girl standing in the dripping gloom of the sewer tunnel. She looked small against the dark weight of the city above them. She wasn't a monster. She was just stranded. The silence stretched between them, heavy and intimate. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them into a proximity that felt charged. Kale could smell her now. She didn't smell like the city. No ozone, no garbage, no cheap synth food. She smelled like cold rain on slate. She smelled like the air at high altitude. It was a clean, sharp scent that made his lungs ache. He noticed that she had stopped checking the bike. She was watching him again. Her gaze wasn't aggressive, but it was relentless. She was scanning his face, his posture, his hands. It felt like she was taking him apart and putting him back together in her mind, analyzing his tensile strength. "Why do you look at me like that?" Kale asked. "Like what?" "Like I am a machine you are trying to figure out how to repair." She took a step closer. The blue light from the bike reflected in her dark eyes. "Humans are inefficient," she said softly. "You are fragile. You require constant fuel. You are susceptible to temperature, and your emotional processing centers override your logic centers with alarming frequency." She tilted her head. "But you are strangely calibrated. You helped me. You lost your livelihood to protect a stranger. That is a statistical anomaly. It is called being decent," Kale said, his voice rough. "Decent." She repeated the word, tasting it. She moved into his personal space. She was almost as tall as he was. Kale's heart hammered against his ribs, a traitorous rhythm that he knew she could probably hear, or sense, or see. When she was this close, the panic he had seen in the garage was gone completely. She was calm. A terrifying, absolute calm that seemed to radiate from her, settling the dust in the air. "Do you fear me, Kyle?" she asked. "Yes," he answered honestly. "Good. Fear is a survival mechanism." She raised a hand, her fingers hovering inches from his face. She traced the line of his jaw without touching his skin. The warmth of her hand was palpable, a stark contrast to the damp chill of the tunnel. "But your heart rate is accelerating," she observed, "and your pupils are dilated. In my culture, these are signs of preparation for combat, or mating." Kale swallowed hard. "That is very direct. We do not waste time on subtext," she said. "What do humans do when they want someone and fear them at the same time? It seems like a paradox that would cause a system crash. We usually make bad decisions." Kale rasped. She leaned in. Her lips were inches from his. The air between them crackled, charged with static. "I am curious about these bad decisions," she whispered. Kale felt a pull, magnetic and undeniable. He wanted to close the gap. He wanted to know if she tasted like the cold rain she smelled of. He leaned forward. A sharp, dissonant chime echoed through the tunnel. Ilara pulled back instantly, her head snapping toward the bike. The romantic tension shattered like glass. The bike was projecting a hologram onto the muddy floor. It was a rotating red symbol, jagged and angry. Below it, a set of coordinates flashed in rapid succession. "What is that?" Kale asked, his voice shaking slightly as he tried to recalibrate. "The drive core," Ilara said, her voice clipped and professional again. "It is tracking a resonance signature, another piece of the technology." She pointed to the coordinates. "Where is this?" Kale squinted at the numbers. He knew the grid. Everyone in the city knew the grid. "Sector 1, he said. "The spire. The clean energy tower? That is what they call it on the billboards," Kale said grimly. "Locals call it the black box. It is a fortress. High walls, private security, and rumors that people who go in for job interviews do not always come out." Ilara's expression hardened. "That is where they have taken it," she said. "If the core is resonating, it means they are trying to activate the secondary module, if they do that without the proper containment protocols. Boom, Kale suggested. Big boom, Ilara confirmed. She looked at her clothes. They were damp and stained with tunnel muck. She looked at Kale. He was covered in grease and soot. We cannot go there like this, she said, and I need equipment. My tools were lost in the crash. Kale sighed. He ran a hand through his hair. I have tools, he said, and clean clothes. But they are back at the shop. The shop that was just raided by a government hit squad. That is the one. Ilara considered this. The statistical probability of them remaining at the site is low. They have already secured the perimeter and found nothing. They will be sweeping the surrounding blocks. The eye of the storm is often the quietest place. You want to break back into my crime scene, Kyle said. I want to retrieve the necessary assets to save your city from vaporizing, she corrected. Do you have a better plan? Kale looked at the bike, then at the dark tunnel stretching out ahead. No, he said. I do not. Getting back was harder than leaving. The city was waking up to the news of the terror attack. Drones buzzed overhead, their searchlights slicing through the rain. Police barricades were going up on the main thoroughfares. They had to leave the bike in the tunnel. Ilara engaged a camouflage protocol that made it look like a pile of rusted pipes, indistinguishable from the rest of the garbage. They moved through the shadows, sticking to the alleys Kale had known since childhood. Ilara moved with a predator's grace, silent and efficient, while Kale did his best not to trip over rotting crates. The garage was a ruin. The front shutter was twisted metal, and police tape fluttered in the wind. But the heavy tactical team was gone, replaced by a single patrol car with 2 bored officers drinking coffee in the front seat. They went around the back. The door Kyle and Ilara had fled through was hanging off its hinges. They slipped inside. The shop was trashed. Tools were scattered, shelves tipped over. But the stairs to the apartment were intact. They crept up the wooden steps, which groaned under Kale's weight. Ilara stepped on the edges, making no sound at all. The apartment was small, tiny. A single room with a kitchenette in one corner and a mattress in the other. It smelled of old paper and engine oil. Ilara stood in the center of the room, looking around with a mix of fascination and horror. This is where you reside? She asked. It is home, Kale whispered, locking the deadbolt. She walked over to the shower stall. It was a plastic unit that had turned yellow with age. She turned the knob. The pipes rattled, spat a burst of brown water, and then settled into a lukewarm drizzle. Primitive, she noted. She walked to the kitchenette. She picked up a packet of dehydrated noodles. She crushed the foil in her hand, listening to the crinkle. This provides nutritional value, enough to keep you moving. She turned to the bed. It was a mattress on a frame Kale had welded himself from scrap iron. She pushed down on it. The spring squeaked loudly. This offends me, she said, her nose scrinkling. The structural integrity is non-existent. How do you recharge on this without spinal misalignment? I sleep curled up, Kale said, grabbing a duffel bag from under the sink. He started shoving clothes into it. Ilara stopped her inspection. She looked at the peeling paint on the walls, the single window with the crack taped over, the sheer lack of comfort. She didn't look pitying. Pity was soft. She looked angry. Why do you live like this? She demanded. You are a skilled technician. I saw you work. In my culture, engineers are elevated. They are the architects of reality. Here, you live in a box and eat dust. It is the economy, Kyle said, grabbing a handful of screwdrivers. Not everyone gets to be an architect. Some of us just have to fix the leaks. It is a waste, she said fiercely. A systemic failure of resource allocation. She walked over to him. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, flat object. It looked like a chip made of black glass. "Take this," she said. "What is it?" "Currency. Universal credit. It is compatible with your banking protocols. I hacked the exchange rate on the way here. There is enough on this to buy this entire building." Kale looked at the chip. It was heavy in his hand. "I am not doing this for money. Ilara." "I know," she said. "That is why you deserve it. Take it, use it. Buy a bed that does not scream." Kale pocketed the chip. He didn't know if he would live long enough to spend it, but the gesture landed in his chest like a warm weight. "We need to rest," he said, "just for a few hours. If we try to hit the tower now, we will be sloppy. We go at dawn, when the shift change happens." Ilara nodded. "I can enter a low-power cycle." She sat down on the floor, her back against the wall, legs crossed. She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed instantly to a rhythm of 4 beats per minute. Kale threw a blanket at her. "Use the bed," he said. "I am fine. Use the bed, Ilara. That is an order from your mechanic." She opened one eye, then sighed. She climbed onto the mattress, sitting upright against the wall, stiff as a board. She looked like a soldier waiting for an airstrike. Kyle grabbed a pillow and lay down on the floor. He was used to hard surfaces. Across the city, in the penthouse office of the Clean Energy Tower, the air was filtered and smelled of lavender and money. Director Sterling stood by the window, looking down at the rain-soaked city. He was a man who wore suits that cost more than Kale's garage, and he wore them with the ease of a second skin. Behind him, a man in tactical gear stood at attention. This was Graves, the leader of the retrieval unit. "You lost them," Sterling said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "The target utilized a propulsion system we were not prepared for," Graves said. "It went vertical. We have drones sweeping the grid. Find her," Sterling said. "The envoy is dead. If we do not secure the courier and the key she is carrying, the deal with the hegemony falls through. And if that happens, Graves, I will not be the only one who is removed from the board." Graves nodded. "We have a lock on a resonance spike. It was brief, but it was there. Sector 4. Burn it down if you have to," Sterling said, turning back to the window. "But bring me that girl. Alive." Back in the apartment, the rain drummed against the roof. Kyle couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the terrifyingly slow breathing of the alien girl on his bed. He shifted, trying to get comfortable on the floor. A hand reached down from the mattress. It was fast, seizing his wrist with a grip that was gentle but inescapable. Kale froze. Ilara didn't open her eyes. She was still in her low-power cycle, but her hand was holding on to him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning universe. Her hand was trembling. It wasn't a physical shake, like a chill. It was a vibration, a frequency of fear and need that traveled through her skin and into his bone. She was dreaming, or processing, or whatever her species did when the darkness took over. Kale carefully moved his hand, turning it so he could clasp hers. He interlaced his fingers with hers. The trembling stopped. She let out a soft sound, something between a sigh and a purr. Her grip tightened, possessive, desperate. Kale lay there on the floor, holding the hand of a woman who could bend light and fly motorcycles, and wondered when exactly his life had ended and this strange, terrifying new one had begun. He fell asleep with the smell of rain and ozone filling the room, her pulse beating a slow, steady rhythm against his palm. The morning light that filtered through the taped-up window of Kale's apartment was gray and unwilling, much like the city itself. Kale woke up on the floor with a stiff neck and a hand that felt strangely empty. The space where Ilara's fingers had interlaced with his was now just cool air. He sat up, his joints popping like dry twigs. Ilara was already awake. She was standing by the kitchenette, dissecting his toaster. Parts were spread out in a perfect geometric grid on the countertop. "Good morning," she said without looking up. "Your bread heating device is inefficient. The thermal coils lose 30% of their energy to ambient radiation." Kale rubbed his face, trying to scrub away the exhaustion. "Please put my toaster back together." "Ilara, it is the only thing in this apartment that works consistently." "I improved it," she said, snapping the casing back on with a single fluid motion. "It will now toast the bread in 3 seconds. Do not stand directly in front of it." Kyle stood up and walked to the sink, splashing cold water on his face. The reality of the previous night came rushing back. The chase, the flight, the hand holding in the dark. He looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror. She looked composed, her spine straight, her eyes sharp, but the faint golden bruises on her neck were still there, pulsing slowly. "We need a plan," Kyle said, drying his face on a towel that smelled of grease. "We cannot stay here. They will circle back." Ilara turned, leaning against the counter. Her jacket shifted, the smart fabric tightening around her shoulders. "We need to access the clean energy tower," she said. "The resonance signature originated from the sub-levels. That is where they are holding the core. And that is where we will find the data we need to expose them." Kyle laughed, a short, humorless bark. "You cannot just walk into the spire, Ilara. That place has more security than the Federal Reserve. Biometric scans, thermal imaging, automated drone patrols. If you get within 50 feet of the perimeter without a badge, they will stun you. If you get within 20, they will shoot you." "I can bypass electronic locks," Ilara said. "Can you bypass a kinetic barrier? Or a squad of private military contractors who get paid a bonus for every intruder they bag?" She went silent. Her fingers drummed against the side of the supercharged toaster. Kyle sighed. He walked over to his tool chest, a battered red metal box that had belonged to his father. He opened the drawers, staring at the wrenches and hydro spanners. "We need a back door," he said. "And I think I know a guy." Rook was a man who smelled permanently of bleach and industrial starch. He drove a massive armored transport truck for the city's linen service, delivering clean uniforms and sterile sheets to the corporate towers and hospitals. He owed Kale a favor involving a rigged odometer and a very angry loan shark 3 years ago. The rendezvous was in a loading zone behind a dumpling shop in Sector 5. Rain drizzled down, turning the garbage in the gutters into sludge. "You are crazy." "Kale," Rook hissed, looking nervously at the street. "You know that? You are actually defective in the head. Just get us through the gate." "Rook," Kale said, leaning against the truck's massive tire. "That is all I need. You drop us at the loading dock. We disappear into the laundry chutes. You never saw us." Rook looked at Ilara, who was standing in the shadows of the alley, her helmet on, her face obscured. "Who is the helmet?" Rook asked. "My apprentice," Kale lied smoothly. "Mute, very ugly. Best to keep the helmet on." Rook grunted. 500 credits. Up front." Kale hesitated. He didn't have 500 credits. He had the black chip Ilara had given him, but using it might trigger an alert. Ilara stepped forward. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metallic cylinder. It was a spare fuse from her bike. She tossed it to Rook. "That is platinum iridium alloy," she said, her voice modulated by the helmet to sound deep and scratchy. pure. Rook caught it. He bit it, then squinted at it. Get in the back. Try not to bleed on the sheets. The back of the linen truck was dark and smelled of antiseptic. Kale sat on a pile of chef coats, watching Ilara work. She had taken his tool belt and dumped it out on the floor. She was holding his favorite socket wrench, frowning at it. This metal is porous, she criticized. It will snap under high torque. It has lasted me 10 years. Kale defended. She reached into a pouch on her belt and pulled out a roll of material that looked like silver tape, but it shimmered like oil on water. She tore off a strip and wrapped it around the handle of the wrench. The tape didn't just stick. It seemed to melt into the steel, fusing with it, turning the handle into a composite grip that looked indestructible. "What is that?" Kale asked. "Structural bonding ribbon," she said. "So, alien duct tape." Kale deadpanned. She paused, looking at him. "If your duct tape can reinforce molecular bonds and conduct electricity with zero resistance, then yes, it is alien duct tape." She tossed the wrench back to him. He caught it. It felt lighter, perfectly balanced. It hummed slightly against his palm. She did the same to his multi-tool and his scanner, applying small patches of the silver material. She then took a handful of small magnetic discs and stuck them to the inside of his jacket. "Signal dampeners," she explained. "They will create a localized dead zone around your body. Thermal cameras will read you as room temperature." Kale looked at the upgrades. He felt like a kid who had just been given the keys to a starship. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" he asked, tinkering. She looked down at her hands. "It is what I do," she said softly. "I fix things. My cast is responsible for maintaining the equilibrium of our vessels. When something is broken, the universe feels wrong. Until I make it right." She looked up at him, her dark eyes visible through the visor of her helmet. "You are broken, Kyle. Your world is broken. I am just broke," Kyle corrected. "There is a difference." "Is there?" she asked. The truck lurched to a halt. The hydraulic hiss of the air brakes cut the conversation short. "We are here," Kyle whispered. The loading dock of the clean energy tower was a cavern of white concrete and brushed steel. It was sterile, bright, and silent. Drones buzzed overhead like angry hornets, scanning barcodes on the crates. Rook opened the back doors. "Go," he whispered. Kale and Ilara slipped out, moving behind a pallet of sterilized lab coats. Kale led the way, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He knew the layout of these service levels. All skyscrapers were the same in the gut. They moved through the laundry processing center, dodging automated carts. Ilara moved with a supernatural grace, her footsteps making zero noise. Kale felt like a bulldozer next to her, but the alien duct tape on his boots, she had done those too, dampened his steps. They reached a service elevator. Kale pried the panel open with his upgraded wrench. The metal yielded like butter. He hacked the control box, sweat dripping down his nose. "We need the sub-levels," Ilara whispered. "Level -4. Kale crossed 2 wires. The elevator shuddered and began to descend. The descent was long. When the doors opened, the air that hit them was freezing. This was not a basement. It was a fortress. The hallway was lined with glass walls. Behind them, men and women in white suits worked on machinery that defied logic. Kale saw a drone engine being disassembled by robotic arms. He saw a weapon that looked like a rifle but had a barrel made of floating crystal shards. "They reverse engineer," Ilara said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "They take gifts and turn them into knives. They crouched behind a server rack as a patrol of armed guards walked past. The guards were not private security. They wore no insignias. Their gear was matte black, high-end, military spec. "They are looking for something," Kyle whispered. "They are looking for me," Ilara replied. They moved deeper into the facility. Ilara paused at a heavy blast door. She placed her hand on the keypad. Her fingers glowed, and the light seeped into the electronics. The lock clicked green. Inside, the room was dominated by a massive wall of screens. It was a surveillance hub. Kyle looked at the monitors. They showed street views, satellite feeds, and facial recognition databases. "Wait," Kyle said, pointing to a screen in the corner. "Look." Ilara froze. On the screen was a grainy video recording. It was stamped with a date from 3 months ago. The video showed a star field. Then, a streak of light. Then, the view shifted to a high-altitude drone feed tracking the streak. "They tracked you," Kale said, his blood running cold, "before you even entered the atmosphere." Ilara stepped closer. Her breath hitched. The video cut to a meeting room. A man in a suit, Director Sterling, was pointing at a star chart. "The asset is inbound," the recorded voice said. "Initiate the jammer. Force the crash in Sector 4. We need the retrieval to look like an accident." "It was a lure," Ilara whispered. The realization shattered her voice. "I did not crash. They shot me down. They utilized a gravity pulse to destabilize my core." She gripped the console, her fingers digging into the metal. "I sent the distress signal," she said. "The envoy. He came because I called him, because I thought it was a malfunction." She turned to Kyle, her eyes wide with horror. "I killed him. Kyle, I called him into a trap." Kyle grabbed her shoulders. He felt the tremors running through her body. "No," he said firmly. "You did not do this." "They did. They set the trap. You were just the bait." She shook her head, pulling away. "You do not understand. The envoy." She didn't finish. She turned and ran toward the far door. "Ilara, wait!" Kale chased after her. They burst into a massive observation chamber. The room was circular, built around a central containment pit. In the center of the pit, suspended by magnetic clamps, was the wreckage of a craft. It was not a bike. It was a pod, sleek and silver, now torn open like a gutted fish. Wires and fluids dripped from the open hull, and in the middle of the wreckage lay a body. It was humanoid, tall and slender. It was covered in a stasis sheet, but one hand hung loose. The skin was gray, lifeless. The golden lines were black, burnt out. Ilara stopped at the edge of the glass. She pressed her hands against it. She didn't scream. The sound she made was worse. It was a low, keening vibration that Kale felt in his teeth. "Brother," she whispered. Kale stood beside her, looking down at the dead alien. This wasn't just a political envoy. This was family. This was why she had been fighting so hard, running so fast. She wasn't saving a mission. She was trying to save him. And she was too late. Behind them. A voice boomed over the intercom. "Subject secure. Initiate containment protocol." Kyle spun around. Red lights began to flash. The blast doors slammed shut. "We are blown!" Kyle yelled. "Ilara, we have to move!" She didn't move. She was staring at the body. "Ilara!" Kyle grabbed her arm. "He is gone. But you are not. Do not let them win twice." She looked at him. Her eyes were burning with a terrifying mixture of grief and fury. For a second, Kale thought she was going to burn the building down with her mind. Then, she blinked. The soldier returned. "The ventilation shaft," she said, pointing up. "It is the only unshielded exit." Guards poured into the observation deck on the level below. Bullets sparked against the glass. Kale threw his grappling hook, another upgrade. A motorized winch attached to his belt. It clamped onto the overhead gantry. "Hold on!" he shouted. He wrapped his arm around her waist and hit the retract button. They shot upward, narrowly missing a hail of gunfire. They landed on the maintenance catwalk, 50 feet above the floor. Drones swarmed from the ceiling vents. Kyle swung his upgraded wrench. It hit the first drone with a satisfying crunch. The alien tape discharging a shock that fried the drone's circuits instantly. "Go!" Kale yelled. They sprinted along the catwalk. Steam pipes hissed around them. More drones appeared, blocking the path. Ilara raised her hand. She didn't blast them. She twisted her wrist. The light around the drones bent. The sensors on the machines went haywire. They started firing at each other, confused by the optical illusions she was weaving. They reached the server room at the end of the catwalk. Kale kicked the door in. They were inside the main data center. Rows of servers hummed in the dark. Kale jammed a chair under the doorknob. "That will not hold them for long," he panted. He looked at Ilara. She was leaning against a server bank, sliding down to the floor, and she looked drained. The light bending had cost her. Kale knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly. "Stay with me." She looked up. Her composure was fractured. She looked young, lost, and incredibly dangerous. "My signal," she whispered. "The distress call. They used it to triangulate his position. My duty was to protect the negotiation. Instead, I facilitated an assassination." Kyle reached out and took her hand. He pulled off his glove so skin touched skin. "Listen to me," he said. "They built a trap. Traps only work because people are predictable, because people trust. That is not a flaw in you, Ilara. That is a flaw in them." She looked at his hand, then up at his eyes. The door behind them buckled. A heavy ram was hitting it. "We are trapped," she said. "No," Kale said. "We are cornered. There is a difference." He pulled her up. He pressed her back against the server tower, shielding her body with his. The space was tight, intimate. Her breathing was ragged. His heart was hammering against her chest. "Your heart," she whispered, her eyes wide. "It is loud. I am terrified," Kyle admitted. "No," she said. "It is steady. It is a rhythmic mechanical function, but it feels conscious." She leaned in, her forehead resting against his chin. Her mouth was inches from his throat. "It calms my instincts," she murmured. "The part of me that wants to detonate this room and everyone in it, your heartbeat quiets it. That terrifies me more than their bullets." Kale froze. The admission hung in the air, heavier than the threat outside. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to tell her that she terrified him too, in the best way possible. But the door hinge snapped. "Focus," Kale breathed. "The drive." He turned to the server. He jammed his modified data spike into the port. "Download everything." He commanded the device. The screen scrolled wildly. Files, videos, schematics, the false flag plan, the blueprints for the alien attack they were going to stage in the city center. "Got it," Kale said, yanking the drive. Ilara reached past him. She pulled a small panel off the server. Hidden inside was not a hard drive, but a small, crystalline module. It pulsed with the same blue light as her bike. "The treaty key," she said. They took it from his ship. She grabbed it. It flared hot white. She hissed and almost dropped it. "It is rejecting me," she said, panic rising. "My biometric signature is compromised by grief, the stress hormones. It thinks I am unstable. It will lock down." She shoved the module into Kale's hand. "Take it." Kale grabbed the crystal. He expected it to burn. Instead, it hummed. A cool, soothing vibration traveled up his arm. The white light softened to a gentle, steady blue. It pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "It likes you," Ilara said, staring at him. "Why?" Kyle asked. "I am nobody. It recognizes intent." She said, "You are a fixer. Kyle, you repair. You do not destroy. That is the basis of the treaty." The door exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Laser sights cut through the haze. "Out!" Kyle yelled. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and threw it at the server bank. He hit it with his wrench mid-air. The extinguisher exploded, creating a cloud of freezing white chemical fog. They dove into the ventilation hatch near the floor. Kyle shoved Ilara in first and scrambled after her, sealing the grate just as bullets chewed up the wall where his head had been. They crawled. The shafts were tight, claustrophobic. Kyle navigated by memory and instinct. "Left," he gasped. "It leads to the exhaust port." They tumbled out of a vent into the rainy night air, 3 stories up, onto the roof of the adjacent parking structure. They didn't stop. They ran until their lungs burned, until the clean energy tower was just a glowing needle in the distance. They collapsed in the shadow of a water tower. Kyle lay on his back, clutching the data drive in one hand and the alien module in the other. The rain washed the sweat from his face. Ilara sat beside him. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her wrist computer. A red light was blinking on her display. "What is it?" Kale asked, sitting up. She turned the screen toward him. It showed a schematic of her bike. A red dot was pulsing on the chassis. "They tagged it," she said, "when we were in the tunnel. Or maybe a drone hit it while we were inside. They are tracking the bike." Kale looked at the module in his hand, the key to a war or a peace treaty. He looked at the drive, the evidence that could bring down the government. "We cannot go back to the bike," he said. "No," she agreed. "And we cannot go back to your shop, or your apartment, or anywhere you have ever been." She looked at him. The rain ran down her face like tears she refused to shed. "If you stay near me." "Kyle," she said, her voice steady and cruel with truth, "you will lose the life you know. You will be hunted. You will be erased. You will never fix another neighbor's toaster or sleep in a bed that is safe." Kyle looked at the city below them, the neon lights, the grime, the struggle. It was a hard life, but it was his. He looked at the module. It was still glowing, warm against his skin. It had chosen him. He looked at Ilara. She was broken, lethal, and the most real thing he had ever encountered. He stood up, wiping the rain from his eyes. He offered her a hand. "I think I already did," he said. She stared at his hand. Then, slowly, she took it. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now," Kale said, gripping the alien key tight. "We find someone who can scream louder than they can. We find the press." The city of Sector 4 had undergone a transmutation overnight. What had been a landscape of neglect, wet pavement, flickering streetlights, and the slow, grinding indifference of poverty was now a landscape of active hostility. Kyle kept his head down, the collar of his jacket turned up against the relentless drizzle. Beside him, Ilara moved with a gait that was too smooth for a human, though she tried to mimic the hunched, defeated shuffle of the locals. She wore an oversized woolen cap pulled low, hiding the circuitry-like bruises on her neck. But Kale felt the heat radiating from her arm where it brushed against his. Every holographic billboard, usually reserved for advertising synth cola or off-world lotteries, was now washing the streets in harsh red light. Threat level critical. Non-human incursion detected. Report all suspicious activity. Rewards for verified tips. The faces on the screens were not Ilara's. Not exactly. They were distorted. Digital composites designed to trigger the uncanny valley response in the human brain. Eyes too wide, jaws too sharp. They were monsters, drawn by committee to justify a war. They are efficient at narrative construction, Ilara murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of a passing patrol drone. Fear sells better than sex, Kale muttered, and it is cheaper to manufacture. They turned a corner, ducking into the shadow of a decommissioned subway entrance. Kyle checked his datapad. It was dead. The battery pulled to prevent tracking. He was navigating by memory and the faded graffiti tags that marked the territory of the old information brokers. We need a signal, Kyle said. We have the drive, but it is just a paperweight if we cannot decrypt it and broadcast it. Who is the contact? Ilara asked. She was scanning the rooftops, her eyes darting with a frequency that made Kale dizzy just watching. His name is Dax, Kale said. He used to write for the City Chronicle before he exposed a defect in the military's body armor contracts. They sued him into oblivion. Now he lives in a Faraday cage and drinks too much solvent gin. Is he trustworthy? He hates the corporations more than he likes money, Kale said. That is the best we can hope for. They moved deeper into the industrial zone, where the buildings were skeletal remains of the manufacturing era. Dax lived in the husk of an old radio tower, a jagged metal tooth rising out of a sea of concrete. The entrance was hidden behind a dumpster filled with rotting fiber optic cables. Kale knocked a specific rhythm on the rusted door. 2 fast, 1 slow, 3 fast. A slit opened. An eye, bloodshot and frantic, stared out. Kale. The voice was a rasp of paranoia. You are dead. I saw it on the wire. You are an accomplice to a planetary threat. I am standing right here. Dax, Kale said, and I have the story. The real one. The eye shifted to Ilara. Who is the girl? She is the story, Kale said. The door bolts slammed back, 4 of them, and the heavy steel swung open. Dax was a wire-thin man vibrating with caffeine and nervous energy. He wore a bathrobe over tactical trousers and a headset that seemed permanently fused to his skull. His apartment was a chaotic nest of monitors, server stacks, and half-eaten noodles. It smelled of ozone and stale spices. Get in. Get in. Get in, Dax hissed, pulling them into the gloom and slamming the door. He scanned the hallway with a handheld frequency detector before engaging the locks. You brought a biological hazard into my sanctuary, Dax accused, pointing a trembling finger at Ilara. I am not a hazard, Ilara said, stepping into the light of the monitors. I am a diplomat. Dax froze. He looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the way she stood, perfectly balanced, ready to move in any direction instantly. He saw the faint, impossible shimmer of her skin under the harsh fluorescent lights of his rig. Holy mother of modulation, Dax breathed. He dropped his detector. You are real. The forums were right. They said I was crazy. They said it was just atmospheric swamp gas or secret Chinese drones. He circled her, fascinated and terrified. Can I get a reading? Just a passive scan? Ilara looked at Kale. Kale nodded slightly. Passive, she said. Dax grabbed a sensor wand and waved it near her. The device shrieked and died. Incredible, Dax whispered. You are a walking electromagnetic anomaly. He ran to his main console, clearing a stack of pizza boxes off the keyboard. What do you have? Give it to me. Kale placed the data drive on the desk. It looked small and insignificant amidst the clutter. Dax slotted it in. His fingers flew across the keys, a blur of motion. Encryption is military grade, naturally. AES 49.6 with a polymorphic key. Nasty stuff. But Dax grinned, a manic, toothy expression. I wrote the back door for this architecture 10 years ago when I was freelancing for Syscorp. The screens flared to life. Code cascaded down the monitors like green rain. Then, files began to open. Video logs, email chains, schematics. Dax's grin vanished. "Oh," he whispered. "Oh, this is not good. This is very, very not good." "What is it?" Kale asked, leaning over the chair. "It is a schedule," Dax said. "Look, the Clean Energy Expo. Tomorrow at noon." He pointed to a schematic. It showed a massive detonation sequence. "They are not just blaming the aliens," Dax said, his voice dropping to a horrified monotone. "They are going to simulate an attack. They are going to use a stolen kinetic core to level the expo center. Estimated casualties." He swallowed hard. 40,000. Ilara went still. The air around her grew cold, the temperature in the room dropping 10 degrees in a second. "They will kill their own," she said softly, "to justify killing us." "It is a consolidation move," Dax explained, typing furiously. "Look at the signatories on this memo. Defense Minister Krell, CEO Vance of Aerodyne. If this attack happens, the Emergency Powers Act kicks in. Parliament is suspended. The military takes control of the sector, and Aerodyne gets the exclusive contract for planetary defense. It is a coup," Kale said, "disguised as a war." Ilara walked over to a rack of equipment in the corner. It was a stack of volatile capacitors wired together with exposed copper. She reached out to touch a glowing blue coil. "Do not touch that," Dax yelped. "That is a dark matter siphon I built from a microwave and a prayer. If you discharge that, we all turn into soup." Ilara pulled her hand back. "Your technology is surprisingly suicidal," she noted. "It works." Dax defended. "Mostly, we have to broadcast this," Kale said. "If the city sees this, the emails, the plan, the casualty estimates, the narrative falls apart." Dax nodded. "I can patch into the emergency broadcast system, override the billboards, the news feeds, the personal data pads. But I need time to scrub the signal so they cannot triangulate us immediately. 3 hours. We do not have 3 hours," Ilara said. "We have to make time," Kale said, while Dax worked, muttering to himself in a language of pure code. Kale and Ilara sat in the back of the room on a crate filled with old hard drives. The tension in the room was thick, a mixture of the impending massacre and the strange, quiet gravity between the two of them. Ilara was staring at her hands. The bruises were fading, but the fatigue was etched into the set of her jaw. "My people," she said quietly, so Dax wouldn't hear. "They are not all like me. I belong to the caste of mediators. We believe in dialogue, but there are others. The wardens, the hardliners," Kale guessed. She nodded. "They believe that any species that has not achieved unity is a contagion. If I fail, if this attack happens and humanity is deemed a threat, the wardens will not negotiate. They will sanitize." "Sanitize? They will burn the atmosphere," Ilara said. "It is a quick process. 12 minutes. Kale felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp room. "So no pressure," he said dryly. She turned to him. Her eyes were wide, dark pools that seemed to hold the reflection of 1,000 stars. "I was trained for this. Kyle. I was trained in 84 languages. I was trained in psychology and combat, in the manipulation of desire, nerdum." "Manipulation?" She looked away, ashamed. "Part of diplomacy is understanding what a species wants and what they crave. We are taught to mirror that, to become what is needed to secure trust." She looked back at him. "But with you, I am malfunctioning." "How?" Kale asked, his voice rough. "I am not calculating," she whispered. "I am not mirroring. When you are near me, My tactical subroutines go silent. I do not want to manipulate you. I just want to be near you. It feels like gravity choosing a direction. It is not a choice. It is a law of physics. Kale looked at her. He saw the alien strength and the terrifying vulnerability. He saw a woman who could level a building but was afraid of her own feelings. He reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm, buzzing with that low-level energy. I am not a project, Ilara, he said firmly. And I am not a mission. I will not be used. I know, she said. But, Kale continued, stepping closer, invading her personal space until he could feel the static on his skin. I am not pretending that I do not want you, either. Gravity goes both ways. She let out a breath, a shaky sound. She reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his cheekbone, the rough stubble of his jaw, the scar over his eyebrow. She wasn't caressing him. She was memorizing him. She was mapping his topography. Why are you looking at me like that? Kale whispered. Because, she said, her voice trembling. The probability of survival has dropped below 4%. And I do not want to forget the face of the man who saved me. The intimacy of the moment was shattering. It was sharper than the fear, brighter than the neon outside. Kale leaned into her touch. He wanted to kiss her, to seal the pact, but the air was suddenly split by a screech of feedback. Got it! Dax shouted. They sprang apart. I have the encryption key, Dax yelled, spinning in his chair. We are live in 10 seconds. I am pushing the data to every screen in the sector. Do it, Kale said. Dax hit the enter key. On the wall of monitors, the red threat level banners flickered. They were replaced by the stolen documents. The video of Director Sterling planning the attack began to play. Yes, Dax crowed. Look at that. We are... The screens went black. Not just the broadcast. The monitors. The lights. The entire room plunged into darkness. What happened? Ilara demanded, her hands instantly glowing with soft blue light. Dax was tapping frantically on his dead keyboard. They cut the hard line, he whispered. They didn't jam the signal. They physically cut the grid. A loud, booming thud shook the heavy steel door. Then came the hiss of a plasma torch cutting through the metal. They are here, Kyle said. Dax grabbed a heavy magnetic drive from his desk and shoved it into Kale's chest. Run, Dax yelled. The back exit, behind the server rack. What about you? Kale asked. I am the distraction, Dax screamed, grabbing his homemade dark matter siphon. He pulled the safety pin. Go, or the story dies with us. The door blew inward. Stun grenades bounced into the room. White light blinded them. A concussive wave knocked the breath from Kale's lungs. Ilara grabbed him. She didn't run. She launched them. She threw him behind the server rack just as the room filled with armored figures. Secure the target, a voice roared. Kale heard Dax laughing, a manic, terrified cackle. Smile for the camera. Boys, crack. The sound was not an explosion. It was the sound of air collapsing. Dax's device discharged. The front of the room vanished in a singularity of imploding pressure, furniture, equipment. And the lead squad of soldiers were sucked into a point the size of a marble, then blasted outward in a spray of superheated dust. Kyle and Ilara scrambled through the hole behind the servers, dropping into the sewer tunnels below. They ran. They splashed through the muck, the sound of boots heavy behind them. They emerged 3 blocks away, gasping for air in a rain-slicked alley. Kale bent over, hands on his knees. Dax. He bought us minutes, Ilara said, her face grim. We cannot waste them. Kale looked up at the street. A police drone hovered there. It didn't fire. It just watched. Then, a voice came from the end of the alley. I told them you would come out here. Kyle. Kyle froze. He knew that voice. Stepping out from the shadows was Jensen, the scavenger. The man Cale had given his last lunch money to in the garage. Jensen looked cleaner than Cale had ever seen him. He was wearing a new jacket. He was holding a shiny new communication device. "Jensen?" Kyle asked, disbelief numbing his tongue. "They offered to clear my debt." "Cale," Jensen said, his voice shaking. "Not just the shark money, all of it. Medical debt for my sister, housing arrears, everything. You sold us out." Cale stepped forward, his fists clenching. "For a clean slate?" 2 million credits, Jensen said, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "They said they just wanted to talk to you. They said no one would get hurt." The screech of tires cut him off. Armored APCs blocked both ends of the alley. Jensen looked at the soldiers, then back at Cale. "I had to. Cale. I was drowning." Cale looked at his friend. He didn't feel anger. He felt a hollow, crushing sadness. The system didn't just break machines, it broke people. It squeezed them until their morals snapped like dry twigs. "Get out of here, Jensen," Cale said softly, "before you see what happens next." Jensen turned and ran. The soldiers advanced. Target acquired. "Surrender or we open fire." Ilara looked at Kyle. "The bike," she said. "It is miles away," Cale said. "In the tunnel." "No," she said. She raised her hand. She closed her eyes and focused. A low hum began to vibrate through the alley. The puddles on the ground started to ripple. She wasn't calling it. She was activating the remote recall, a feature she had told him was broken. "Get down!" she yelled. From the sky, a black shape dropped like a meteor. The bike slammed into the pavement between them and the soldiers, cracking the concrete. It was smoking. The camouflage paint burned off, revealing the gleaming alien alloy underneath. Ilara vaulted onto it. Cale didn't hesitate. He swung on behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Hold on," she commanded. The soldiers opened fire. Bullets pinged off the bike's shield. The engine roared, not a hum this time, but a scream of raw power. They shot straight up, clearing the alley walls just as a rocket exploded where they had been standing. They hit the elevated highway, weaving through traffic at 300 miles per hour. The chase was on. Behind them, 3 corporate pursuit drones, sleek winged hunters, locked on. "They are fast," Kyle yelled over the wind. Ilara leaned the bike into a turn that shouldn't have been possible. Her knee scraped the asphalt, sparks flying. "I am faster," she shouted. They zipped between 2 cargo trucks, the clearance less than a foot on either side. The drones followed, blowing the trucks apart with sonic cannons. "We cannot shake them," Kyle yelled. "They are networked." Ilara looked at the dashboard. A warning light was flashing. "Core temp critical." "I have to sever their link," she said. "How?" She didn't answer. She sat up straight, taking her hands off the controls. "Ilara, what are you doing?" She spread her arms, her jacket ripped open at the seams, not the fabric, but the reality of her disguise. For a heartbeat, Ilara wasn't a girl in a jacket. She was a silhouette of blinding, shifting light. The geometric patterns under her skin erupted, projecting outward in a massive sphere of energy. It wasn't an explosion. It was a truth. The wave of light hit the drones. It didn't destroy them, it overwhelmed them. The sensors couldn't process the complexity of the data hitting them. The AI pilots crashed, unable to compute the sheer existence of what they were seeing. The drones spun out of control, smashing into the guardrails and exploding in fireballs. Ilara collapsed forward, the light fading instantly. She slumped against the tank, gasping for air. Her skin was gray, the golden lines dim and flickering. "Ilara!" Cale grabbed the controls, reaching around her to steady the bike. "I am functional," she wheezed, "just drained." They exited the highway, drifting down toward the dense cluster of skyscrapers in the city center. They landed hard on the roof of an old hotel, the bike skidding across the gravel and slamming into an AC unit. Silence returned, heavy and ringing. Kyle pulled Ilara off the bike. She could barely stand. He propped her up against the wall. "You are hurt," he said, checking her over. "Internal," she rasped. "I used too much reserve power." She looked at the sky. The clouds were swirling, unnatural. The corporate fleet was circling. "We are cornered," she said. Kale looked at the edge of the roof. Below them, the city was swarming with police lights. Above them, the hunters were closing in. "We have the data," Kale said. "We can still—" "No," Ilara cut him off. "We cannot broadcast. Dax is gone. The network is locked down. We have no voice." She reached into her boot and pulled out a small, slender device. It looked like a shard of black glass. "What is that?" Kale asked. "An emergency beacon," she said. "I thought you said if you called them, they would burn the atmosphere." "The wardens would," she said. "But this operates on an old frequency, a family frequency." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a terrifying resolve. "It is a gamble. If the wardens hear it first, we are dead. If my clan hears it, we might have a chance." She pressed the shard. It shattered in her hand, releasing a pulse of sound that Kale felt in his marrow rather than heard. "It is done," she whispered. She leaned her head back against the brick wall, closing her eyes. She reached for his hand again, gripping it tight. "Kale," she said softly. "Yeah? If they come, they might not come peacefully. You need to be ready to run. Away from me." Kale squeezed her hand. He looked at the sky, where the clouds were beginning to part, not from wind, but from the descent of something massive and silent. "I am not going anywhere," he said. Ilara opened her eyes. She looked at him, and a single tear, luminous and gold, tracked down her cheek. "Then you are a fool," she whispered. "But you are my fool." The sky above the city did not darken. It simply ceased to have depth. The clouds, usually a rolling gray ceiling of industrial smog, flattened into a singular bruised purple sheet that stretched from horizon to horizon. To the commuters below, it looked like a storm front. To the sensors at the Aerodyne monitoring station, it looked like the end of the world. Something massive was sitting in the upper atmosphere. It was silent, invisible to the naked eye, and it displaced enough air to trigger barometric alarms across 3 continents. In the penthouse of the Clean Energy Tower, Director Sterling watched the readouts on his wall-sized screen. His face was pale, illuminated by the red strobing of the silent alarms. "They are early," he muttered, smoothing the lapel of his silk suit. "The projection model said we had another day." General Graves stood behind him, checking the load on his sidearm. "It changes nothing," Graves said. "It only accelerates the necessity. If that ship decloaks before the explosion, we lose the narrative. People will panic, but they will be looking up, not at the ground. We need them looking at the tragedy we are about to give them." Sterling turned. The cold calculation in his eyes had been replaced by a frantic, brittle energy. "Move the timeline," he ordered. "Trigger the event during the opening ceremony." "We do it now." The Clean Energy Expo was a sprawling glass-enclosed campus built on top of the ruins of old Sector 6. It was a monument to corporate greenwashing. Fake grass made of recycled plastic. Holographic trees that shimmered with perfect, bug-free leaves, and air scrubbed so clean it smelled like dentist offices. Kale felt exposed. He was wearing a stolen maintenance uniform that was a size too small, the sleeves riding up his forearms. He carried a tablet he had swiped from a distracted intern at the security gate. Beside him walked Ilara. She had abandoned the heavy jacket and helmet. She now wore a sleek gray pantsuit she had acquired from a dry cleaning van. Her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked like an executive assistant, except for the way her eyes constantly mapped the structural integrity of every wall they passed. They moved through the crowd of dignitaries, reporters, and wealthy investors. The air buzzed with polite conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. "This place is a lie," Ilara whispered, her voice tight. "It is marketing," Kale corrected, keeping his head down as they passed a security checkpoint. "Marketing is just lying with better lighting." He flashed his stolen badge at the scanner. It chirped green. Dax had done good work on the encryption codes before the end. They walked into the main pavilion. In the center of the room stood the centerpiece of the expo, the Vertex core. It was billed as a revolutionary infinite power source for the city. It sat on a raised dais, pulsating with a soft green rhythm, encased in a transparent housing. Kyle knew what it really was. It was a bomb. It was a stolen alien capacitor rigged to overload and vaporize 10 city blocks. The crowd pressed in. On the stage, the mayor was shaking hands with the CEO of Aerodyne, a man with a smile that looked like it had been focus tested to death. Kale tapped his earpiece, tuned to the internal security frequency. "Teams Alpha and Bravo, hold position. Wait for the signal. They are here," Kale murmured. Backstage, in the rafters. Ilara stopped. She pressed a hand to her ear, but she wasn't listening to the radio. She was listening to something else, a frequency that hummed in her blood. She went rigid. "My faction," she whispered. "What are they saying?" "They are demanding a status report," she said, her voice trembling. "The wardens have control of the bridge. They are tracking the ship above us. They say I am compromised, that I have spent too much time with the indigenous population." She looked at Kyle. The fear in her eyes was not for herself. "They have ordered an immediate extraction. If I do not comply, they will erase the site to prevent technology contamination." "Erase the site?" Kale asked. "You mean the expo? I mean the city." "Kale." She gripped his arm. Her fingers were strong, bruising his skin through the thin fabric of the uniform. "I have to go," she said. "If I leave now, I can signal them that the tech is secured when they will hold fire." "And the bomb?" Kale asked, nodding toward the glowing green core on the stage. "If I stay to stop it, the wardens will see it as a betrayal. They will think I am siding with you against them. They will fire." She was torn. He could see the fissure running through her, the crack between duty and conscience. She was a soldier who had forgotten how to follow orders. Kale looked at her. He saw the woman who had fixed his toaster. He saw the woman who had held his hand in the dark. "Ilara," he said softly. She looked at him. Her eyes were wet. "I want you," she whispered. It was a raw, jagged admission, not as a tactical asset, not as a guide. "I want you. I want to stay here in this messy, broken gravity. But if I choose that want, I doom my mission. I am afraid that my desire for you is a defect." Kale took her hand. He didn't care who saw. Kindness is not a defect, Ilara, and neither is love, but it is not free. It is a choice that costs something, usually everything. He looked at the stage. "I am going to stop that bomb. You do what you have to do But know this. I am not choosing to save the city because I am a hero. I am choosing it because you are in it." She stared at him. The conflict in her face settled into a terrifying resolve. "You are inefficient," she said, her voice cracking, "and you are foolish." She squeezed his hand. then let go. We stop the bomb, she said. Then we deal with the sky. They moved. Ilara created a distraction. She walked past a server bank controlling the lighting rig and casually brushed her hand against it. A pulse of energy shot from her fingertips. Half the lights in the pavilion blew out in a shower of sparks. The crowd screamed. The emergency lights bathed the room in a dull red glow. In the chaos, Kyle vaulted onto the stage. Security guards were shouting, pushing through the confused crowd. Kyle slid under the transparent housing of the vertex core. He was now visible to everyone, illuminated by the green pulse of the device. But the casing shielded him from immediate interference. He popped the maintenance hatch with his upgraded alien tape wrench. Inside, the machinery was a nightmare of human wiring grafted onto alien crystal. "Hey, you! Get away from there!" Kyle looked up. A panel of executives had remained on stage, frozen in confusion. One of them, a vice president of operations, was pointing a shaking finger at him. Kyle didn't stop working. He ripped out a handful of fiber optic cables. "I am stabilizing the thermal runaway," Kyle shouted, using his most authoritative mechanic voice. "The localized dampeners are out of phase. Do you want this thing to go critical and melt the governor?" The vice president blinked. No? Then let me work. The flux variance is hitting 40%. Kale turned back to the core. He found the detonator. It was a crude, clumsy receiver wired into the crystal's output port. He cut the blue wire. Nothing happened. He cut the red wire. The green pulsing light slowed. He ripped the receiver out completely and threw it on the floor. The core dimmed. It was just a rock now. "Clear!" Kale yelled, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked for Ilara. She was standing by the stage stairs, watching the balcony where the snipers were positioned. Then, a second light began to blink, not on the core, on Kale's belt. The alien module, the biological key they had stolen from the tower, was pulsing, fast, angry. Ilara's eyes went wide. "Kale!" she screamed. The stage floor beneath Kale rumbled. A hidden compartment slid open. Rising out of the floor was not another bomb, but a receiver dish, a docking port, and it was singing to the module in Kale's pocket. Kale tried to pull the module out, to throw it away. He couldn't. It was stuck to his hand. The bio-interface had bonded with his nervous system. "Redundancy," Ilara shouted, sprinting toward him. They built a redundancy. The module wasn't just a key. It was the trigger, and Kale was the finger. Before Ilara could reach him, the back curtain of the stage was ripped away. Graves stood there. He was holding a heavy stun rifle. Behind him were 6 soldiers. "Secure him," Graves yelled. "He is the catalyst." Ilara moved. She didn't run. She blurred. She hit the first 2 soldiers like a kinetic hammer, sending them flying into the percussion section of the orchestra. But Graves was ready. He fired a netcaster. The weighted mesh wrapped around Ilara, pinning her to the ground. The mesh sparked with high-voltage electricity. She convulsed, crying out in a language Kale didn't understand. "Ilara!" Kale screamed. He lunged for her, but 3 soldiers tackled him. They slammed him onto the receiver dish. Graves walked over to Kale. He grabbed Kale's wrist, the one with the glowing module fused to the palm, and forced it down toward the port. "Thank you for bringing it back to us." Graves smiled. "We couldn't bypass the biometric lock, but you bonded with it. You are the only universal adapter we have." He pressed Kale's hand inches from the lock. "When this connects," Graves whispered, "the signal will overload the grid. The explosion will look exactly like an alien weapon discharge, and you will be the man who pulled the trigger." Kale struggled, kicking and thrashing, but the soldiers held him fast. Ilara, on the floor, fought the net. Her skin was burning, the electricity disrupting her ability to phase. She looked at Kale. She looked at the bomb. She had a choice. She could overload her own core. She could detonate herself. It would destroy the stage, the bomb, Graves, and Kale. It would save the city. It would save the mission. It was the logical choice, the efficient choice. She looked at Kale's eyes. He wasn't looking at the bomb. He was looking at her. He was mouthing one word. Run. She roared. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of rejection. She rejected the logic. She rejected the mission. She stopped fighting the electricity and absorbed it. Her skin turned white hot. The net melted. She stood up. She wasn't an executive assistant anymore. She wasn't a diplomat. She was a weapon of war. She moved with a speed that the human eye couldn't track. She didn't use energy blasts. She used physics. She displaced the air around her, creating vacuums that knocked soldiers unconscious before they realized they couldn't breathe. She reached Graves. She didn't strike him. She simply touched his rifle. The metal shattered into dust. Graves stumbled back, terrified. She grabbed Kale. She ripped him from the grip of the soldiers. She didn't try to remove the module. She grabbed the receiver dish and crushed it with her bare hand, destroying the port. The connection failed. The bomb remained dormant. But the moment was not over. Cameras were rolling. The news feeds were live. The entire world just watched a woman glowing like a star tear through a military squad to save a man in a maintenance uniform. The narrative of alien monsters didn't fit the image of her shielding Kale with her own body, taking a bullet meant for him and not even flinching. Graves scrambled backward, shouting into his radio, "Kill them! Kill them both!" Ilara looked up. The ceiling of the expo center was glass. Through it, the purple sky was churning. She looked at Kyle. She was breathing hard, the light fading from her skin, leaving her gray and exhausted. "We bought time," she gasped, but we did not stop the clock. Kyle helped her stand. The module in his hand was still pulsing, but slower now. They stood in the center of the wrecked stage, surrounded by unconscious soldiers and a stunned, silent crowd. Above them, the sky tore open. It wasn't a ship, it was a sound. A single resonant note blasted from the atmosphere. It shattered the glass ceiling of the expo. It shattered windows across the city. It brought people to their knees, clutching their ears. It was a sound of absolute, terrifying authority. The message ended. Silence returned, ringing and painful. "What was that?" Kale whispered, wiping blood from his ear. Ilara looked up at the hole in the sky. Her face was a mask of dread. "It was not a negotiation," she said. She turned to him. "That was the gavel. My people have judged this planet. They believe the leadership is irredeemable." She grabbed his shoulders. "Kale, if we fail now, there will be no invasion. There will be no war. There will only be judgment. They are going to sanitize the surface." "How long?" Kale asked. Ilara watched the clouds swirling into a funnel directly above the tower. "1 hour," she said. "Maybe less." She looked at the module in his hand, then at the exits where more Aerodyne security teams were pouring in, weapons raised. "We have to move," she said. "We have to finish this." Kale nodded. He picked up his wrench. "Then let's go make some noise." The service tunnels beneath the expo center were a labyrinth of steam and shadow, a stark contrast to the polished glass and green-washed marketing above. Kyle slid down a maintenance ladder, his boots hitting the grate with a wet clang. The air here was thick, smelling of hydraulic fluid and the scorched ozone scent of overtaxed circuits. Ilara landed beside him. She did not make a sound, but her breathing was ragged. The display of power on the stage had drained her. The golden lines beneath her skin were dull, flickering like a dying fluorescent bulb. "They are sealing the perimeter," she rasped, leaning against a rusted support beam. "My senses detect thermal signatures at every exit. We are boxed in." Cale looked at the maze of pipes around them. He wiped a smear of grease from his cheek, his eyes scanning the color-coded conduits running along the ceiling. "We are not boxed in," he said. "We are in the engine room, and I know how to make an engine choke." He pointed to a massive yellow pipe vibrating with pressure. "That is the coolant line for the main server farm upstairs. If I divert that pressure into the fire suppression system, it will flood the upper levels with halon gas and freezing foam," Ilara finished. "It will blind their sensors and freeze their doors shut," Cale added. He grabbed his upgraded wrench. He didn't have the strength of an alien soldier, but he had the leverage of a man who had spent 20 years wrestling rusted bolts. He jammed the wrench onto the diversion valve. "Help me," he grunted. Ilara placed her hands over his, even drained. Her strength was undeniable. Together, they heaved. The metal groaned, screeched, and then surrendered. The valve spun open. Far above them, a muffled boom echoed through the concrete. Then came the sound of rushing gas and the panicked shouting of security teams over the intercom. Kyle didn't stop. He moved to a junction box on the wall. He ripped the cover off, exposing the raw fiber optics. "Give me a spark," he said. Ilara touched the wires. A small arc of blue energy jumped from her finger. The lights in the tunnel flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. But Cale didn't need light. He knew the layout of industrial basements better than he knew the lines on his own face. He grabbed Ilara's hand. "Run," he whispered. They sprinted through the dark, guided by the faint pulse of the module fused to Cale's palm. It was pulling him, a magnetic itch in his bones, leading him deeper toward the secondary signal. They burst through a service door into the lowest level, the foundation block. Here. The walls were reinforced concrete, thick enough to survive a nuclear strike. And in the center of the room, behind a wall of bulletproof glass, was the control center. It wasn't a military bunker. It was a private viewing room. Plush leather chairs, a mahogany bar, and a wall of screens showing the chaos upstairs. And standing at the console, watching the end of the world with a glass of scotch in his hand, was Director Sterling. He looked up as Cale and Ilara slammed against the glass. He didn't look afraid. He looked annoyed. He pressed a button on the console. The heavy blast door to the side hissed open, inviting them in. Kyle stepped inside, his wrench gripped white-knuckled in his hand. Ilara stayed close, her eyes locked on Sterling. "You are persistent," Sterling said, swirling his drink. "I will give you that. Most rats know when to scurry back to the sewer." "Stop the countdown." "Sterling," Cale said, his voice echoing in the soundproofed room. "The bomb on the stage is dead. The show is over." Sterling smiled. It was a cold, thin expression. "The stage was just theater, Mr. Kyle. The audience needs to see a flash. But the real work? That happens down here." He gestured to the floor. Beneath a grate, a second device was humming. It was larger than the one on stage, wired directly into the city's seismic dampeners. "Redundancy," Sterling said. "If we trigger the fault line, the devastation is even more cinematic. The alien weapon destabilizes the tectonic plate. Half the city falls into the sea. And who is there to pull the survivors out? Who is there to rebuild?" "Aerodyne." "You are insane," Ilara said. Her voice was quiet, deadly. "You are killing millions to secure a contract." "I am securing the future," Sterling snapped, his composure cracking for a split second. "Look at the sky. There are ships up there, real ships. We are not alone, and we are not ready. Humanity is fractured. We fight over borders and oil and gods. We need a single enemy, though we need fear to weld us together. He pointed at the ceiling, at the invisible threat above. I am giving the world a reason to unite. I am giving them a shield. If I have to sacrifice one city to save the species, that is a math equation I am willing to solve. You are not saving the species, Kale said, stepping forward. You are just trying to be the one who owns the cage. Sterling sighed. He tapped the console. The confession is already uploaded, Kale said. Sterling froze. What? Kale held up the data drive they had stolen from the tower, the one Dax had died to decrypt. While you were watching the stage, we patched into your internal comms. Kale lied. He hadn't, but he needed Sterling off balance. We broadcast your voice logs, the funding trails, the bribe to the defense minister. It is all out there. Sterling checked his data pad. His face went gray. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a localized leak Kale had triggered when he shorted the server farm. But on the screen, files were unlocking. Names were appearing. It doesn't matter, Sterling whispered. Once the device fires, history is written by the survivors. He reached for a red key on the console. Ilara moved, but she stumbled. The exhaustion had taken her legs. Sterling slammed his hand down. Nothing happened. The device under the floor didn't detonate. It just hummed, a rising dissonant pitch. It is locked, Sterling realized, staring at the screen. The biometric handshake. It requires the key. He looked at Kale. He looked at Kale's hand. The module. Sterling pulled a pistol from his jacket. Give me the hand, he said, or I will take it off your corpse. Kale looked at the gun. He looked at the device under the floor. He realized with a sinking, cold clarity what had to happen. The device wasn't just a bomb. It was a receiver. It was waiting for the command. And the module on his hand was the only transmitter left. He couldn't just smash it. If he destroyed the interface, the failsafe would trigger, and the bomb would blow anyway. He had to tell it to stop. He had to speak its language. He had to link. Kyle looked at Ilara. She was on her knees, trying to rise, her eyes filled with panic. Do not do it, she whispered. Kyle, if you link with a core that size, it will burn you out. It will rewrite your neural pathways. You will not be you anymore. Kale looked at his hand. The blue light was pulsing in time with his heart. I have to, he said. He looked at Sterling. You want the hand? Come and get it. Sterling fired. The bullet hit Kale in the shoulder. The impact spun him around, slamming him into the console. Kale grit his teeth against the searing pain. He didn't fall. He used the momentum to slide down to the floor, reaching through the grate. Kale, Ilara screamed. She summoned the last of her strength. She threw a wave of force at Sterling, knocking him into the back wall. The gun clattered away. Ilara crawled to Kale. She grabbed his face. Please, she begged, do not. It will kill you. Kale looked at her. The pain in his shoulder was a dull roar, but the feeling in his hand was sharp, electric. It will not kill me, he gasped, but it might change me. He leaned his forehead against hers. He could feel her trembling. Ilara, he whispered, I need you to listen. I am listening, she sobbed. You asked me once why I fixed your bike, why I helped you because you are decent, she said. Because I am human, Kyle said. And being human means we fix things. We do not just survive. We try to make it better. He looked deep into her dark, alien eyes. I have never wanted a person this badly, she whispered, her voice breaking. It makes me feel alive and ashamed and holy all at once. If you do this, if I lose you to the machine, You won't lose me, Kyle promised. He anchored her with his gaze. Whatever you are, Ilara, whatever they made you, do not turn your heart into a weapon. She choked back a sob. She pressed her lips to his forehead. Then do not turn yours into a cage. Kale smiled. It was a weak, pained smile. He reached down. He pressed his palm, the one with the glowing alien shard, onto the interface of the device. Contact. There was no sound. There was only light. The world dissolved. Kale wasn't in the control room anymore. He wasn't in the city. He was floating in a void of impossible geometry. He felt the device connect to his nervous system. It wasn't like plugging in a cord. It was like a river bursting a dam. Information flooded his brain, not words, not pictures, concepts. He saw the history of 1,000 stars. He felt the cold vacuum of space as a physical texture. He heard languages that sounded like the birth of nebulas. He felt the purpose of the device. It wasn't a weapon. It was a terraforming anchor, a tool meant to stabilize a planet's core, twisted by human hands into a breaker bar. He felt the pain. It was blinding. His neurons were firing hot, trying to process the alien data. It felt like his mind was being stretched, pulled thin over a vast distance. He remembered his garage, the smell of oil, the sound of rain. He remembered Ilara, the way she looked at a toaster, the way she held his hand. Custodian. A voice echoed in his head. Identity confirmed. Command? Kale focused on the image of the device. He focused on the concept of stop. Disengage. He thought, shut it down. Protocol accepted. The sensation of expansion snapped back. Kale gasped, his eyes flying open. He was back in the room. He was lying on the floor. Smoke was rising from his hand. The device beneath the grate wound down. The humming stopped. The lights on the console turned from angry red to a cool, dormant blue. It was over, but not without cost. A shockwave of energy blasted out from the device, not destructive, but communicative. A signal pulse. It passed through the walls of the expo. It passed through the city. It circled the globe in milliseconds. Every hidden alien sensor, every cloaked ship, every piece of buried technology on Earth lit up. In the sky above, the clouds tore apart completely. The cloaked ships were no longer invisible. They hung in the low orbit, massive, silent shapes of silver and black, undeniable to every eye on the planet. Secrecy was dead. Kale slumped against the console. His arm was numb. The module on his palm was no longer glowing. It had turned a deep, permanent black, fused into his flesh like a tattoo of obsidian. Sterling pulled himself up from the floor. He looked at the screens. He saw the ships decloaking and he saw the news feeds showing the alien fleet. He picked up his gun. "You ruined it," he whispered. "You ruined everything." He raised the weapon at Kale's head. Ilara was there. She didn't use powers. She didn't use tricks. She moved with the brutal efficiency of a woman who had nothing left to lose. She caught Sterling's wrist. She twisted it until the bone snapped. The gun fell. She kicked his knee, shattering the joint. Sterling collapsed, screaming. Ilara stood over him. Her hand was raised, ready to deliver a strike that would stop his heart. "Do it," Sterling wheezed. "Make me a martyr." Ilara froze. Her hand trembled. "Do not turn your heart into a weapon." She looked at Kyle. He was watching her, bleeding and broken, but his eyes were steady. She lowered her hand. "No," she said coldly. "That is too efficient for you." She walked to the console. She took the data drive Kale had dropped. She jacked it into the broadcast array. She hit upload. The screens in the room and the screens in the expo upstairs and the screens in Times Square and Tokyo and London flickered. Sterling's face appeared. His voice played, "If I have to sacrifice one city." We need fear to weld us together. Sterling stared at the screen. The narrative he had tried to build was crumbling in real time. He wasn't a savior. He was a monster. Ilara turned to him. "You wanted to be remembered," she said. "Now you will be." The blast doors blew open. This time, it wasn't Aerodyne security, then it was a mixed unit. Human special forces in UN blue, and with them, tall, armored figures in sleek silver suits, alien authorities. They poured into the room. Weapons were leveled. "Freeze! Do not move!" An alien figure stepped forward. It was tall, its face hidden behind a polarized visor. It held a staff that hummed with the same energy as Ilara's bike. "Identify," the alien voice boomed, translated through a vocal synthesizer. Ilara stepped in front of Kale. She spread her arms, shielding him. "I am Ilara of the Third Concordance," she announced. "Diplomatic envoy." The alien looked at her. "You are a fugitive, Ilara. You have violated the non-interference directive, and..." The alien pointed the staff at Kyle. "You are harboring a biological asset. That human is carrying a Class A interface. It is property of the High Command." Kale struggled to sit up. He looked at his hand. The black crystal pulsed once. "It is not property," Kyle rasped. "It is attached." The alien stepped closer. "It can be removed," the figure said coldly. "The procedure is survivable." Kale tried to stand, but his legs failed him. Ilara didn't move. She stood her ground against her own people. "He is not an asset," she said firmly. "He is the custodian." The alien paused. The soldiers lowered their rifles slightly. "Explain," the alien commanded. The module bonded with him. Ilara said, "It accepted his neural pathways. It obeyed his command to disengage the weapon. By the laws of the ancient protocol, he is the legal guardian of the technology." She looked at the alien commander. "If you touch him, you violate your own law. If you remove it, you break the treaty before it is even signed." The room went silent. The human soldiers looked confused. The aliens looked at each other. "This human is a mechanic?" the commander asked, sounding baffled. "He is a fixer," Ilara corrected. The commander lowered the staff. "This creates a complication, a political problem. We cannot disappear a custodian." "Good," Kale muttered. "I hate disappearing." The commander looked at Ilara. "And you? You have compromised your mission. You have revealed our presence prematurely. You have bonded with a local. I have prevented a genocide," Ilara said. "And I have secured a liaison who understands the technology better than your engineers." She reached down and took Kale's good hand. She pulled him up, supporting his weight. "I am invoking the Union right," she said loudly. The alien commander stiffened. The humans murmured. "What is the Union right?" Kyle whispered, leaning against her. "It means I am publicly binding myself to you," she whispered back. "Symbolically, politically, if they want to get to you, they have to go through me. And if they want to punish me, they have to answer to you." She looked at the crowd of soldiers and aliens. "We are a single political entity," she declared. "You deal with both of us, or you deal with neither." The commander stared at them for a long moment. Then, slowly, he holstered his weapon. "The High Council will not be pleased," he said. "But the protocol stands." He stepped aside. "Secure the prisoner," he ordered, pointing at Sterling. "Get a medic for the custodian." The roof of the expo center was crowded, but Kale and Ilara stood apart, near the edge. The medic had patched Kale's shoulder and wrapped his hand. The pain was dulling to a throb, but the sensation of the alien mind, the vast, starry echo in his head, was still there. It would always be there. The rain had stopped. The purple clouds had vanished. In their place, the night sky was filled with lights, not stars. Ships, hundreds of them, hanging in low orbit, silent and watchful. Below, the city was a cacophony, sirens wailing, people shouting, the roar of a world realizing it had just become much larger. Kale looked at his hand. The black crystal caught the reflection of the orbital fleet. "My life is over, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "The quiet one. The one with the garage and the bills." "Yes," Ilara said. She was standing next to him, her shoulder touching his. She looked at the ships, then at the city, then at him. "You are a target now, Kale. Every government on Earth will want to study you. Every faction in the fleet will want to influence you. You will never be anonymous again." Kyle sighed. He looked at the skyline of Sector 4, the gritty, broken place he had called home. "I never liked being anonymous anyway," he said. He turned to Ilara. She looked beautiful and terrifying and exhausted. "What about you?" he asked. "You could go back. You could get on one of those ships and leave this mess." She smiled. It wasn't the guarded smile of a diplomat or the sharp smile of a soldier. It was a soft, human smile. "I cannot," she said. "Why not?" "Because," she whispered, leaning in close, her hand finding his. "You fixed my bike for free." She looked up at the fleet, then back into his eyes. "And I am not leaving you behind for any price." Kale laughed. It hurt his chest, but it felt good. He squeezed her hand. The alien module pulsed warm against his skin, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a foreign object. It felt like a tool he could use to fix things. "We have a lot of work to do," he said. Ilara nodded. "The world is broken. Kyle." He looked at the chaos below, then at the woman standing beside him. "Yeah," he said. "But that is what we do. We fix it." They stood together on the edge of the new world, hand in hand, ready to build something that could survive the stars.